If you clicked on this title, I already know something about you that most people in your life have never guessed. You have wondered quietly, maybe never out loud, whether you actually belong to God, or whether you have just been standing near the people who do. That is the question underneath everything you are about to hear. And I am not going to dance around it, because there is a moment in Scripture where God does something that should have shaken the ground under every religious assumption on earth. He looks at a people with no covenant, no lineage, no temple, no history with him, no claim on him whatsoever, and he says, "These are mine now too." Not instead, not as a replacement, as an expansion. He widens the family. He pulls in the ones standing outside the fence. And I need you to hear the part that most people miss, because it changes everything about how you understand your own calling. God did not take his hand off one people to place it on another. Scripture is blunt about this. His gifts and his calling are irrevocable. He does not unpromise. He does not withdraw what he swore by his own name. That is not who he is. And if he ever became that, then nothing he has said to you is safe either. So what did he do? He grafted. Think about that word for a second, because Paul chose it deliberately, and he chose it as a farmer would. He describes an olive tree, an ancient one, deep-rooted, planted long ago. And he says some branches were broken off, and a wild branch was taken from a tree growing out in the open field, cut from a plant nobody cultivated, nobody watered, nobody pruned. That wild branch gets pressed into the wound of the cultivated tree, bound, wrapped, held there until the two grow into one another. And here is what happens next. The wild branch starts drinking from a root it did not grow. It gets fed by a history it was never part of. It bears fruit it has no business bearing. That is the whole gospel in one image. And that image is you. You are the wild branch. Now let me tell you why that matters more than any theological argument I could give you. Because you have spent years feeling like the wild branch, and you thought it was a disqualification. You thought it was the evidence against you. I have talked with people at the back of church buildings from Bakersfield to Birmingham, who told me the same thing in different words. Nobody prayed over me when I was born. I came in late. I came in broken. I came in through a door nobody blessed. And every time somebody testifies about their grandmother's faith, I feel the gap. I need to tell you what that gap actually is. It is not distance from God. It is the shape of the graft. Let me show you a woman who lived it. There was a famine in Bethlehem, in the town whose name literally means house of bread. There was no bread. And a man took his wife and 2 sons and left. He crossed the border into Moab, which was not a neutral place. Moab was the nation Israel was warned about. Moab was the enemy on the other side of the water. Going there was not a vacation. It was desperation. The man died there. Both sons married Moabite women, and then both sons died too. And what is left, in a foreign country, is 3 widows, with nothing between them and starvation. Naomi decides to go home. She is bitter, and she says so. She tells the women of Bethlehem later, "Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, because the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me." That is an honest woman. And she turns to her 2 daughters-in-law on the road and tells them to go back. Go back to your mother's houses. Go back to your gods. There is nothing for you where I am going. I have no more sons to give you. My hands are empty. One of them kisses her and turns around. That was the reasonable choice. Nobody in Scripture condemns her for it. And the other one refuses to let go. Ruth grabs onto her mother-in-law on a dirt road between 2 countries. and says the words that have been read at 10,000 weddings by people who have no idea what they cost her. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Understand what she is doing. She is a Moabite woman with no husband, no sons, no property, no protection, walking into a town where her nationality is a slur. She is walking into poverty on purpose because she has attached herself to a bitter old woman and to a God she has never seen do anything for her. She has no lineage. She has no standing. And she gets there, and she goes to work. She goes out into the barley fields at harvest, and she gleans, which means she walks behind the paid workers, picking up what they dropped. That is the bottom of the economy. She works from morning until evening in the heat, with her back bent, gathering what other people considered waste, so that she and Naomi can eat that night. And the owner of that field notices her. Boaz asks his foreman, "Whose young woman is this?" And the answer he gets is a description. Not a name. She is the Moabite who came back with Naomi. That is how the town sees her. Her country is her identity. She is the foreigner. Boaz walks over to her, and he does not talk to her like a foreigner. He tells her to stay in his fields, to drink from his water jars, to stay close to his young women where she will be safe. He tells his men not to touch her. He tells them to deliberately pull stalks out of the bundles and leave them on the ground for her to find. And Ruth falls on her face and asks him the question that is really the question of this entire message. Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, a foreigner? Why me? I have no claim here. And Boaz answers her. He says, "It has been fully told to me everything you did for your mother-in-law after your husband died, how you left your father and your mother and the land of your birth, and came to a people you did not know before." And then he says this, "May the Lord repay your work, and may you receive a full reward from the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Under whose wings you have come to take refuge. That is graft language. That is a bird pulling a chick that was not hatched in her nest in under her feathers anyway. Now here is where it gets real. And here is why I told you this story instead of a dozen others. Turn to the first page of the New Testament. Matthew opens his gospel with a genealogy, a legal document, essentially establishing the credentials of the Messiah, generation after generation of names. And in a culture that traced the line through fathers, a few women get named anyway. Ruth is one of them, the Moabite, the outsider, the one they identified by her country instead of her name. She is written into the bloodline of the king. Her great-grandson is David, and through David, generations later, comes the one who saves the world. God did not just let her in. He built the line of the Messiah through her. So when somebody tells you that you came in through the wrong door, that your family was not spiritual, that you did not grow up in it, that you found faith at 38 in a hospital parking lot, instead of at 8 in a Sunday school room, I want you to remember a barley field in Bethlehem, and a foreign woman with dust on her hands, who ended up in the genealogy of Jesus Christ. Late does not mean lesser. Grafted does not mean guest. I think about the families I have known who adopted. There is a couple I knew in Ohio who fostered for 6 years before a placement finally became permanent, and I remember the day the paperwork went through. There was a courtroom, and a judge who did this kind of hearing every week, and a boy in a shirt that was slightly too big for him. And what struck me was not the ceremony. It was what happened after. That boy did not become half a son. He did not get a smaller portion of the inheritance. He was not the child they mention with an asterisk at Thanksgiving. His name changed. The legal record of his life was rewritten. In the eyes of the law, he had always been theirs. That is not a nice metaphor. That is the actual word Paul uses. Adoption, sonship. And he says we cry out Abba, the word a small child uses. The intimate one. The one you only get to use if you are family. You did not earn your way to that table. Neither did anyone else sitting at it. Now let me take you somewhere else. Because there is another kind of outsider, and this one might be closer to your story than Ruth is. Naaman was the commander of the army of Syria. Not a poor man. Not a desperate widow. He was a decorated general. A man the king leaned on. A man Scripture describes as great and honorable, and the passage says something startling. The Lord had given victory to Syria through him. God had been working through a man who did not worship him and did not know him. And Naaman had leprosy. Everything he built, and underneath the armor his skin was dying. There is a detail in that story that people skim past, and I want you to sit in it. The person who tells him where to find healing is a little girl, a captive, an Israelite child who had been taken in a Syrian raid, which means Naaman's own army destroyed her home and killed people she loved, and she is now a servant in his wife's household. And this child, who has every reason on earth to stay silent, says, I wish my master would go to the prophet in Samaria. He would heal him. The smallest, most powerless person in that house opens the door. So Naaman goes. And he goes the way powerful men go, with horses and chariots, and a letter from his king, and a fortune in silver and gold, and 10 changes of clothing. He shows up at Elisha's door prepared to pay for his healing, because that is how the world he lives in works. Everything has a price, and he can afford it. And Elisha does not come out. He sends a messenger. The prophet does not even walk to the door. And the message is 7 words long. Go wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh will be restored. Naaman is furious. And listen to what he says, because it is the most honest thing in the chapter. I thought he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, and wave his hand over the place, and heal me. Are not the rivers of Damascus better than all the waters of Israel? I thought. He had a script in his head. He knew what his healing was supposed to look like. There was supposed to be a ceremony. There was supposed to be dignity in it. Instead, a man he never met sent a servant to tell him to go get in a muddy river in a country he had invaded. And his own servants again, the powerless ones, talk him down. They say, Father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you not have done it? How much more when he says simply, wash and be clean. So this general takes off his armor in front of his men. He walks into the Jordan and he goes under. Once, nothing. Twice, nothing. 3 times, 4, 5, 6, and there is no record of a change. And I want you to feel how long that is. 6 times under the water with your soldiers watching, and your skin exactly as it was. The 7th time he comes up, and the text says his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child. He was not an Israelite when he went under. He was not an Israelite when he came up. God healed a Syrian commander in a Jewish river on the word of a Jewish prophet, and Jesus himself later points to that story specifically. He stands up in his hometown synagogue and says there were many lepers in Israel in the time of Elisha, and none of them were cleansed, only Naaman the Syrian. They tried to throw him off a cliff for saying it, because there is something in the human heart that cannot stand the idea that God's mercy might reach past the boundary we drew. And here is what I want you to do with that. If you have spent your life feeling like you are on the wrong side of some invisible line, the wrong family, the wrong past, the wrong decade of your life, to be starting this, Naaman is your evidence. The mercy came to him where he was. It did not wait for him to become someone else first. It just required him to go under the water, instead of writing his own script for how the healing should look. Most of the people I talk to are not waiting on God. They are waiting on the version of the answer they already decided on. Let me tell you something about myself now, because I do not think you should take any of this from a stranger. My name is George, and I did not come to any of this the clean way. There was a stretch of my life where I was doing all the outward things, and none of it was reaching me. I could quote it, I could explain it to somebody else, and watch it land for them. And I would drive home and sit in the car in the driveway with the engine off, sometimes for 20 minutes. Because I did not want to walk in and be the man everybody thought I was. I felt like a fraud. Not because I did not believe I did, but because I could not shake the sense that I had been let in on a technicality, that everybody else in the room had a pedigree and I had a story I did not want told. I kept waiting for someone to check my papers, and what broke it was not a sermon. It was one line I could not get out of my head for about 3 weeks. From Hosea, where God says, of a people who were not his, I will call them my people, who were not my people, and her beloved, who was not beloved. Who were not. That is a past tense. Something was true about them, and then it stopped being true, because God said something over them. That was the first time I understood that the wild branch is not a lesser branch. It is a branch the gardener went out and got on purpose. There are messages that pass through your eyes, and there are messages that pass through your spirit. If something in you recognized itself while watching, don't dismiss it. That is the Spirit confirming what was already written. The secret protocol carries 7 keys that unveil what heaven deposited in you before you ever arrive, things no one around you has ever been able to name. It comes with the full audiobook for your moments of prayer, silence, and encounter with God. And you also receive the awakening map, the guide that illuminates the 5 seasons of spiritual awakening, revealing with precision exactly where you are and what comes next. The link is pinned in the first comment, but only for a limited time. Don't let this moment pass without a response. Now I want to show you the moment the door actually swung open, because it did not happen quietly, and it did not happen without a fight. There was a Roman centurion named Cornelius living in Caesarea, a soldier of the occupying army, and Scripture describes him as devout, God-fearing, generous to the poor, a man who prayed constantly and still completely outside the covenant. He was doing everything a man could do from where he stood, and where he stood was outside. An angel comes to him in the middle of the afternoon and tells him his prayers and his giving have come up before God as a memorial. Send for a man named Peter. Meanwhile, about 30 miles down the coast, Peter goes up on a rooftop to pray while lunch is being made. And he falls into a trance and sees something lowered down like a great sheet held at 4 corners, and it is full of every kind of animal, the ones he had been taught his whole life not to touch. And a voice says, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." And Peter, this is the man who walked with Jesus for 3 years, says no. He says, "Not so, Lord. I have never eaten anything common or unclean." Not so, Lord. Those 2 words do not belong in the same sentence, and he says them anyway, because the boundary in his head was older than his obedience. And the voice comes back, "What God has cleansed, you must not call common." 3 times. The same vision, 3 times, until it is burned into him. And while he is standing there trying to work out what it meant, the men from Cornelius knock on the gate downstairs. Peter goes. He walks into a Gentile's house, which he was not supposed to do. And he finds Cornelius has gathered his whole family and all his close friends, and they are waiting in the room. And Peter says out loud the thing he has just barely learned. You know it is unlawful for a Jewish man to keep company with someone of another nation, but God has shown me that I should not call any man common or unclean. And he starts to preach. He does not even finish. The Spirit falls on that whole room in the middle of the sentence, and the believers who came with Peter are astonished. Scripture says exactly that. Astonished because the gift had been poured out on the Gentiles too. That is the hinge of the whole thing. Not a policy change, not a committee. God moved first, and the people who had been inside the longest had to run to catch up with what he was already doing in a Roman soldier's living room. And notice the order of it, because the order is the message. Cornelius was praying before Peter had the vision. God was already at work on the outside of the wall before he explained anything to the people on the inside. The angel did not come because someone vouched for Cornelius. Nobody vouched for him. He had no sponsor and no referral and no name in that community at all. Peter says it plainly when he opens his mouth in that house. Truly I perceive that God shows no partiality, but in every nation whoever fears him and does what is right is accepted by him. In every nation, he had to see a sheet come down out of the sky 3 times before he could say that sentence, and he had walked with Jesus. If it took Peter that long, be patient with the people around you, who still cannot make room for how you got here. So let me answer the title honestly. God chooses another people, because the tree was always meant to be bigger than the fence around it, because the promise to Abraham was that in his offspring all the families of the earth would be blessed, all of them, from the beginning. That was the plan. Because the wild branch was never an accident or a consolation prize. It was the point. But I owe you the hard half of this too. A graft is a wound. That is the mechanism. The gardener cuts into the trunk and cuts the branch, and the 2 raw places are pressed together and bound, and that is the only way the sap crosses over. There is no version of this where you get the root without the cut. Which is why some of you have been through a season that made no sense, where things you thought were yours got taken, where a door you were sure about closed, where you got quiet in a way you had never been quiet before. You have been reading it as rejection. It is not rejection. It is binding. And binding is uncomfortable on purpose. A grafted branch gets wrapped tight and held immobile, sometimes for a full season, because any movement at the joint will break the connection before it forms. The branch cannot tell the difference between being held and being trapped. It only knows it cannot go anywhere. Every instinct it has says something has gone wrong. Nothing has gone wrong. It is being fused to a root system, older than it is. Caleb waited 45 years for a mountain he had already been promised. He was one of 2 men who came back from spying out the land and said, "We can take it," and then he walked in circles in the wilderness for 4 decades, with a whole generation that did not believe him. 45 years between the promise and the possession. And at 85 he walks up to Joshua and says, "Give me this mountain. I am as strong today as I was the day Moses sent me." The waiting did not weaken him. It bound him to the root. So I want you to leave here holding 2 things at once. You were not chosen because of your line. And you were not disqualified because of your line either. The whole architecture of it, the Moabite in the barley field, the Syrian in the muddy river, the Roman in his own living room exists, so that no one at that table can look across it and say they earned their seat. Now here is what I am actually asking you for. In the comments, tell me the moment you first felt like an outsider in your own faith. Not the theology of it. The moment. Was it a room you walked into where everyone else knew the songs? Was it a conversation at a family table where you realized you were the only one? Was it hearing someone testify about a childhood you did not get to have? Give me the place, the actual place, the kitchen, the parking lot, the hospital hallway, and give me how old you were. I read them, and I want to know where you were standing, when you first thought there was a line, and you were on the wrong side of it. Because that is usually the exact spot where the gardener made the cut. This channel is created without ads and without platform income. If these messages have touched your heart, strengthened your faith, or helped you during a difficult moment, and you'd like to support this work, you can use the CR code on your screen or the contribution link in the pinned comment. Thank you for walking this path with us. Ruth was still called the Moabite 3 chapters after she was already family. The town never stopped saying it. God wrote her into the genealogy of his son anyway, and he let the label stand, right there in the record, so that every outsider who ever read it would know exactly how they got in.